Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to this online program where we are marking the auspicious occasion of the 42nd anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Also, we're going to be discussing a very important topic of freedom of expression versus hate crime. But before I begin, let us honor and bless this gathering with the discussion and the mention of the greatest revolutionary person in the history of mankind. He changed the dynamics of the Arabian Peninsula. The Persian and the Roman Empire would walk and trek through the lands of the Arabian Peninsula without paying attention to the people that lived there. There was no respect and honor and dignity of the people of Arabia. But the revolution that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought, it brought honor, respect, and dignity. You know why? Because he did not compromise with the Meccan elite for any matter. It was not just a change of government. It was not something just a change of government, or it wasn't like where he asked the Meccans to have a participation in the current political structure that is in Mecca. But the Prophet ﷺ, he was very steadfast. In fact, there is a riwayah that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ sent Abu Talib ﷺ to the Meccans and say, tell them that shall I share you a secret which will make you rule over Arabia, the Persian Empire, and the Byzantine, and also and beyond. The Meccan said, Abu Talib, go ask your nephew what he has to say. The Prophet ﷺ said, Qulu la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. Follow what I have brought forth for you, a oneness in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and follow me and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the prophets prior to me, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you can see how steadfast the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. He did not just bring another new system, another new religion. In fact, Islam claims to be a way of life. In Surah Ma'idah, verse number 3, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, today I have perfected you, your religion, and completed my favor upon you, and chosen Islam as your way. And finally, if you want to know what kind of revolution Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought, we can hear from Jafar bin Abi Talib alayhi salam. When he went to King Najashi in Abyssinia, he said, and when the king asked me, tell me about your prophet, he said, O king, we were in a state of ignorance and immorality, conforming to idols, eating wild animals, and committing every kind of inequity. We honored no relative and asked no neighbor. The strongest amongst us exploited the weak. Then Allah sent us a prophet, one of our own people, whose lineage, truthfulness, loyalty, and purity we always known. He called us to conform to Allah alone and throw away the stones and idols that we, as well as our ancestors, used to hold high in high esteem as our sustainers and providers. He commanded us always to tell the truth, to remain true to our trust and promises, to assist the relatives, to be good neighbors, to abstain from eating blood and consuming things that were forbidden, and to avoid fornication and be false witnesses. He commanded us not to rob wealth from the orphans or falsely accuse married women. He ordered us to conform to Allah alone, not to associate rivals to Him, establish salat, to fast and pay zakat. This is the kind of revolution that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought. And we are trying our best to follow on his and create a society where we value honor, dignity, truthfulness, and the things that I listed to you. We have blessed this occasion with the mention of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let us further bless this occasion with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Brother Bilal Ali will be reciting the Holy Quran. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عم يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وحاجا وأنزلنا من المحسرات ماء ثجاجا لنخرج به هبا ونباتا وجنات ألفافا إن يوم الفصل كان ميقاتا يوم ينفخ في الصور فتحتون أفواجا وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا إن جهنم كانت مرصادا للطاغين مآبا لابثين فيها أحقابا لا يذوقون فيها بردا ولا شرابا إلا حميما وغساقا جزاء وفاقا إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا وكذبوا بآياتنا كذابا وكل شيء أحصيناه كتابا فذوقوا فلن نزيدكم إلا عذابا إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دحاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من عذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you, Brother Bilal, for honoring and blessing this gathering with the recitation of the Holy Quran. May Allah give you ajr for that recitation. Moving on, before I introduce our next speaker, Brother Phil Valeto, I have some spoken word written on for this occasion. A man from Humain took this torch. When he had left, they were a select few, a small but strong in faith crew, who had bid farewell to their ancestral home. In the streets as children were, they would roam. The enemy was sitting outside to shed his blood, to nip this movement in its bud, but blowing air over does not extinguish for the light of Allah is distinguished. As Muhammad rode his camel, Allah guided to a cave dark. His safety Allah had provided. Under the enemy's nose, he remained secure. For the plan for the deen, Allah had ensured. As he left darkness towards light, from a weak community to might, to create a new future, a new beginning, a new ummah under his upbringing. This hijrah caused it to grow, the light to shine and glow. Over the days, Muhammad established a government promise in the divine tablet. In it, people he trained to support every mustad'af, every oppressed cohort, whose words reached Persia and Rome, shook every pharaoh's arrogant throne. A prophet with a state was a necessity to strengthen this deen against any calamity. Power with tarbiyah is Muhammad's way, otherwise politics and religion go astray. Allah had promised, if you stand firm, they will gather in numbers to your faith affirm. Allah is the mighty and merciful, gives you a state and makes it bountiful. Years had gone by, the ummah left to dry, authority taken over by the mean and the sly. Another Muhammad was needed to again try to take this message, attempt to fly. A man from Khomein took this torch to light a blaze every enemy to scorch. He was like Ibrahim and ummah unto himself. He was Ruhullah, a world unto himself. He established a godly example, an attempt to create a Muhammadi sample. Pharaoh and Caesar shook once again, trying to blow out the candle once again. His people stood firm together as a band, the party of Allah, a distinct brand. Embarrassing the mighty is Allah's way, the absolute, taking over the mighty by a small group but resolute. Makkah was freed as Muhammad returned. The Shah had left and Ruhullah returned. Truth has come and falsehood has departed. Indeed, every falsehood shall be departed. As time passes on, this tree grows strong. Its enemies perish in hell. But don't be in slumber and sleep, for danger can quietly creep. Stand under the flag of Wilayah, for the fort of this deen is Wilayah. A man from Khomein took this torch to light ablaze every enemy sword. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. With this, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Brother Phil Wilaito, who's the editor of the Virginia Defender, a quarterly newspaper based in Richmond, Virginia, USA, a lifelong anti-war activist. He was an organizer in 1979 of one of the only protests in the US demanding the deposed Shah of Iran be sent home to stand trial for his crimes against the Iranian people. He has traveled twice to Iran and is the author of the book Defending Iran, Notes from a US Peace Delegation's Journey Through the Islamic Republic. We welcome Phil to express his opinion on this matter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brother Asif. And thank you very much to the Muslim community of GTA Canada for this invitation to participate in this very important program this evening. It's an honor, and I really do appreciate it. The topic that we are being asked to address is hate speech versus free expression. And this is a rich subject, and one that is under particular scrutiny in the United States these days. We have a former president who made a series of statements and expressions and speeches that resulted in a physical assault on the U.S. Capitol, and he has been impeached and is now has just been acquitted in the U.S. Senate of the charge of incitement to insurrection. Quite a charge to bring against a president of a country that the president himself would attempt to organize an insurrection against the government that he supposedly heads. And his defense was that he was merely exercising free speech, and therefore should not be held accountable for the actions that resulted from that free speech. It's an interesting argument, and it's a false one. The classic example that people use to describe the limits of free speech is that you cannot stand up in a crowded movie theater and yell fire. If you do, people are quite likely to panic and run for the exits and create a stampede, and people can be hurt and possibly killed. And because of that, society recognizes that there are consequences to words, and that the context in which these words are used will determine whether someone has an unlimited right to express them, or whether there are limitations that are imposed because of the effect that they have on other people. Now, today in the United States, or let's say in years past, that would make the example clearer. If a white person walked up to a black person and called them the racial slur that we refer to as the N-word, there may be no consequences. If the black person responded in a physical way, that black person may well be arrested and tried and convicted and sent to jail for assault and battery. But I remember a case in the early 1970s when I was organizing in the anti-war movement, trying to influence active duty soldiers to turn against the war in Vietnam. And there was a case of a white lieutenant who had insulted a black soldier and had called him the N-word. And the black soldier resulted by punching the lieutenant in the face. And he was arrested and charged with assault of a superior officer. And he was tried, and he was acquitted. He was found not guilty. And the reason was the judge said that in the context of the racial tension that existed in society and in the US military, to use this incredibly insulting racial slur constituted what was called fighting words, and that the lieutenant should have known that there would be an immediate and forceful reaction. And so the black GI was acquitted. Now, I don't know what would happen today. We're in a different period. But in the early 70s, the U.S. was up to its neck in the war in Vietnam. There was racial tension that was ripping the country apart, and that was manifested within the military, which affected the ability of the military to function. And the military leadership decided that they could not afford to allow the type of overt racism that had characterized the military really since its very beginning. And so this particular white lieutenant was himself punished instead of the black GI who assaulted the lieutenant. I think this is important because it shows that in all of these circumstances, whether you yell fire in a crowded theater, whether you are in a position of power and authority and influence and motivate a crowd to become violent, or whether you are insulting an entire class of people, a race of people, or a religion, the context is extremely important. So what is the context in terms of hate speech against Muslims? Um, Years and years ago, before the first Europeans began to colonize Africa, there were Europeans who traveled to Africa, to throughout the Malian Empire, to the city of Timbuktu, which was a center of learning, and they brought back stories of the African civilization that they had not been previously aware of, and compared it to the level of civilization in England, in London at the time, and it was a very favorable comparison. And Timbuktu, of course, was a center of learning, of Islamic learning. Um, and there was not the racism and the dismissal of the black race that was to follow. As a matter of fact, Shakespeare, the great English playwright, wrote a play in which the main figure was Othello, a black man. And at the time, we are told there were some 500 free black people living in London. But once Europe began to engage in the slave trade in order to provide the enslaved labor that would make the agriculture of the so-called New World profitable, they had to demonize the black race in order to justify the oppression that was part and parcel of chattel slavery and of the slave trade. And they began to develop political science theories and pseudoscience theories that categorized people on a hierarchy, and that white people were at the top of this hierarchy and black people were at the bottom. They developed racial slurs and stereotypes and stories and mythology in order to dehumanize black people so that they could feel comfortable and justify the oppression that they were imposing on black people in order to exploit their labor. I think if we were to go back in history, at least until the time of slavery, I think we would probably find that there was prejudice that was developed and promoted against all people of color by the Europeans, because they saw themselves as the true representatives of humanity. They saw themselves as the regular people, the default, and everyone else was the other, and everyone else was inferior. So I'm quite sure that there were stereotypes and racial prejudice directed against people in the Middle East, according to their race and also according to their religion. But after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed and the British and the French took upon themselves to divide up the Middle East into countries that they could control, there began to be the need to stereotype the people of that region in a more direct way and to relegate them to an inferior status on the world scale. And that tendency, that development only increased as time went on. What is the interest of the West in the Middle East and South Asia? Is it just a need of a particular race of people to dominate the world? Is it simple arrogance? Is it something endemic to the DNA of the European race? I believe it has to do with the fact that the Middle East is the repository of 2/3 of the world's oil reserves. And whoever controls oil controls the world. Oil makes modern industrial societies run. Without oil, there is no industry, there is no transportation, there's no communication, there is no manufacturing. Japan is a powerful economy, but it imports 90% of its oil, and therefore is dependent on whoever owns the oil, whoever controls the distribution of the oil, whoever can turn off the spigot and deprive Japan of this liquid gold that is so necessary for the operation of a modern industrial society. And that is the interest that the West has. That's the interest that the United States has. once it became clear how valuable oil was, and it was really Winston Churchill when he was head of the Admiralty for Great Britain, who began to see the value of using oil to power naval vessels as opposed to coal. It was more efficient. Ships could stay out at sea longer. It made it easier for them to dominate the oceans. He recognized early on the value of oil. And the British government quickly took the opportunity to gain control over the oil of Persia in the early part of the 20th century, and the development of British petroleum and the conflicts that developed when the Iranian people decided that they no longer wanted or no longer willing to tolerate the domination of the natural resources by Britain. And Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh led the nationalization of the oil industry in Iran, which was the first time not colonized, but a dominated, oppressed country had taken control of its own resources from Western powers. As these struggles developed, it became more and more necessary to demonize the people of the Middle East by race and by religion. Of course, it's selective. The United States government has been very friendly to the government of Saudi Arabia, even though that government is very reactionary, both in terms of its own people and in terms of its relations with other people in the region, and has created the world's greatest humanitarian crisis in Yemen. The United States has stood by Saudi Arabia and supported that genocidal war, and has supported Saudi Arabia's attempt to dominate the region. That's an exception. When governments stand up, governments or people stand up and resist the United States' attempt at hegemony, as the Palestinian people have done, as the Lebanese people have done, as the Syrian people have done, and especially as the Iranian people have done, then there is no limit to the hostility and the demonization that the U.S. rulers will roll out against these perceived enemies. So today, the phrase Islamic terrorist is used frequently by people from both of the major political parties in the United States, as if the religion of Islam itself was somehow inherently violent. If you compare references to warfare in the Quran with references to warfare in the Old Testament of the Bible comes up as a far more violent religious tract. But it is Islam that is demonized. It is Islam that is equated with violence and with terrorism. And what is the basis for the conflicts in the Middle East today? The basis for the conflict is that the United States primarily wants to achieve hegemony in the region in order to control the flow of oil, which gives it a dominant position in the world. And it is opposed to any government or people or political or religious movement that opposes that hegemony. And the most powerful opponent to that attempt at U.S. hegemony is, of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which has never been dominated or completely controlled by another country, has never been completely colonized. It has a culture that goes back many thousands of years. It has contributed to world culture in many, many ways. And it is a proud country. And on that basis alone, refuses to be dominated by the United States. But when it also sees that the United States is attempting to dominate other countries in the region and suppress the legitimate rights to self-determination of the Palestinian people and others, then Iran objectively is in opposition to the United States government, to U.S. imperialism. And so comes under particular attack, both the threat of military force the endless series of sanctions, which has had such a devastating effect on the people of Iran, whether it is the demonization of the people of Iran and of its leadership, so that these phrases and words and racial and religious slurs are justified in the West, no matter who does it, as an expression of free speech. The Europeans feel that they have the right to insult anyone, to insult any government, to insult any political leader, to insult any religious leader, to insult any prophet. That they can ridicule, they can satire, they can use any cultural form of attack in order to attempt to isolate and demonize and dehumanize a people and a religion that it wants to encircle with hostile opinion in order to weaken it in the general political struggle, which basically comes down to an attempt to dominate the region for economic reasons. Within this context, I think it's useful to ask the question: is there a limit to what one people can say against another? Now, if a white person uses the N-word racial slur against a black person, today in the United States and in most of the world, that is understood to be unacceptable, completely unacceptable, because we have understood the context in which that takes place. If a black person were to use a racial slur against white people, it doesn't have the same effect because of the power relationship. A member of the oppressor nation has power to hurt, to oppress a member of the oppressed nation, but not the other way around. There's nothing that a black person can say against me as a white man that changes my life, that changes my situation. It's just a verbal insult. But if I, as a white man, can insult a black person with the most vile racial slurs, that's an expression of power. That's an expression of a power relationship. And it can hurt the other person. It can limit their ability to live a full life. It can limit their ability to simply relax in a world where they always have to be careful, always have to be on guard, always have to be on the defensive, because you never know when the enemy may strike. And it's the same today in the slurs and the demonization and the insults that some people in the West hurl against people of the Islamic faith. It's not acceptable. It's not an expression of free speech because of the context of oppression of the peoples of the Middle East and their religion in a world that is dominated by the West, specifically by the United States economic and political system. It is not acceptable to insult people on the basis of the fact that they are followers of Islam. It's not acceptable. It's not an expression of free speech. There is no right to insult the religious leaders of Islam. Now, I can say that, but that's not going to stop anyone from using insults and attempting to demonize people on the basis of their religion. But I think it's important to raise this argument because it is an ongoing debate within Western society. When a French satirical journal prints a series of cartoons insulting the Prophet Muhammad, there are people who defend those insults on the basis of defense of the right to free speech. And I totally disagree with that, and there are many others of us who do as well. You do not insult the religion of an oppressed people. You do not go to an Indian territory in the United States and insult the Native American religion. That's not the same thing as making a joke about the Pope of the Catholic Church. There is a power relationship implied. So I hope that this is some contribution to the discussion. It's only one person's point of view, but I think it has some relevancy for the debate that is taking place in the West over the limits of free speech and what is permissible, in particular in terms of discussion of religions that represent people who are oppressed by U.S. imperialism. I hope that one result will be that folks who are targeted by racists and reactionaries in the West will know that there are some who object to that and are trying to carry out a struggle against that oppression, and that hopefully will open the door to a broader cooperation between all of us who have an objective interest in opposing oppression in general and U.S. imperialism in particular. So thank you again very much for inviting me to participate in the program. It's a great honor, and I look forward to hearing the other speakers as the evening goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Phil, for that wonderful speech and enlightening us on this concept of freedom of expression. And, you know, the things that I want to summarize that you had mentioned, and something that, you know, is sometimes looked upon in the questions asked, that why can one group be able to, quote unquote, insult the other one and not the other way around? It's basically, as what Brother Phil described, is the power relationship that is there, where one group in an authority position is isolating a group and dehumanizing them to weaken their political struggle and to hegemonize them. And that's what Phil was talking about. And thank you so much for that wonderful contribution to this topic. Moving on, we have another speaker here. Before I introduce him, I want to also talk about the Islamic concept of what freedom of expression means in the context of an Islamic state. So I have taken excerpt from Maulana Maududi's freedom of expression section in his book of Political Struggle, where he talks about Islam gives the right of freedom of thought and expression to all its citizens of the Islamic State on the condition that it should be used for the propagation of virtue and truth and not for spreading evil and wickedness. This Islamic concept of freedom of expression is what he believes superior to the concept prevalent in Western and some Eastern societies as well. Under no circumstances would Islam allow evil and wickedness to be propagated. It also does not give anybody the right to use abusive or offensive language in the name of criticism. This is a beautiful point, where in Islam, in Islamic State, every Muslim has the right to Amar bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar. The right to freedom of expression for the sake of propagating virtue and righteousness is not only a right in Islam, but an obligation. One who tries to deny this right to his people is openly at war with the concept of Islam. And the same thing applies to the attempt to stop people from evil, whether this evil is perpetrated by an individual or a group of people, or even the government of the country itself, or the government of some other country. It is the right of every citizen in the state, and it's an obligation that he should warn and reprimand the evildoer. This is the concept of freedom of expression. Even today, as Phil had mentioned, we have come to realize that there are certain restrictions, and those restrictions are based on that what we want to preach is what is true and what is a fact. And keeping in context of the power relations that we have. The Holy Quran also mentions the trait of a believer is that they enjoin what is proper and good and forbid what is improper. And what is the quality of a hypocrite? The Quran says they bid that is improper and forbid what is proper. And further on, let me conclude. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if any one of you comes across the evil, he should try to stop it with his hand using force, if necessary. If he's not in position to stop it with his hand, then he should try to stop it by means of his tongue, his expression. And if he's not even able to use his tongue, then he should at least condemn it in his heart. And this is the lowest degree of faith. This is what freedom of expression means in the context of Islam, where one is free to express their opinion against something bad that is happening in the society and preach what is good. And it gives the right to an individual to even question the ruler itself. This is what Maulana Maududi is talking about. And with this, I would like to introduce our dear Imam Abdul Alim Musa. And the reason I chose Maulana Maududi because I've heard some of his Jummah khutbahs. He does mention him, so this gives a good context here. And those who don't know Imam, he's born at Clarence Reams in 1945. Abdul Alim Musa is an African American Muslim Imam and the director of Masjid al-Islam of Washington, D.C. He is an activist and founder and director of a Sabiqun movement, and also the Islamic Institute of Counter-Zionist American Psychological Warfare. He's a strong critic of U.S. policies and its support for the Israeli occupation. Imam Abdul Alim Musa has served as a well-known public speaker across the world and has visited Iran on several occasions to deliver speeches on Islamic unity, oppression of African Americans, and his experiences as a convert Muslim, as well as to attend Islamic unity conferences held in Tehran. Dear Imam, we welcome you to this program.
Assalamu alaikum. Should I begin? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Dear brothers and sisters or viewers, this is a great privilege to participate in this program. Before we get into the actual lecture side, I'd like to, since it's a close time to the 42nd anniversary, the celebration of Islamic revolution in Iran, I would like to, first of all, congratulate the people of the Islamic Republic of Iran for holding out and for surviving and for showing extreme discipline for over 42 years. We also want to thank them for their sacrifices, and we want to thank them for their concern for other Muslims, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in America, whether it's in Africa, Asia, that we thank them, although they're facing so many challenges themselves. In fact, we would go so far as to say that they're the tip of the spear during this part of our lives, because they have had a successful revolution against the dominant force, or what used to be the dominant force in the world, that is the United States of America. So we want to thank them, we want to congratulate them, and we want to let them know how we feel. And we're in touch with their reality. Although we're here in America, we're in touch with their reality. And we can't say it more than this is necessary for the time that we thank them again and again for their great contribution. But I want to say a few things about right here also. I want you to look at this as one of our old flyers. Masjid al-Islam, the victory of Islam over the Shah and the victory of Masjid al-Islam over the combined forces of American Zionism. So when we say victory of Islam over the Shah, we're saying that we thank the people of Iran because the people of Iran have given us an inspiration. They've shown that it can be done. They've let the world know that not only can you have a successful struggle against the great Satan, but you can actually not only survive, but thrive. In the Islamic Republic today, they have the most advanced armaments, self-produced armaments, right? They have the highest level of self-produced defensive mechanisms. They're number 4 or 5 in drone technology in the world. They're shooting things and missiles and guidance systems into outer space. Can you imagine? And they're doing that all on their own. That means that not only can you have a successful revolution, but you can survive against the combined forces of Jahiliyyah. And not only just survive, but you can thrive under every boycott, under every sanction, under every low curveball that can be thrown at a people, including war. You can survive. And we thank Iran for that. Now it says the victory of Masjid al-Islam over the combined forces of American Zionism. I want to let the people know that we haven't been asleep here in America. I want to let you know that we have been busy. So I want to show you a few things that let the world know that we haven't been asleep here in America. So if you were to look at this poster, you would see the police, you would see a government agent standing right here. You would also see the sign Masjid al-Islam, which we opened over 40 years ago, and you will see the Oakland Police Department, and you will see me being arrested, and you can see that I must have been in the shower when I was in the masjid, and they're taking me out and they're taking me to jail under the word of somebody who has no authority to speak about Masjid al-Islam. And this is in Oakland. And I also want to show you another picture. This is my dear son. This guy was shot 6 times and stabbed 3 times in Oakland, California. This is my son. And you can see how one of the bullets broke his shoulder up here because his shoulder is going straight out and straight down. That's not normal. Okay, those are some of the things that we have had to deal with here. And here's some of the reasons why. This basically, I'm sure you read Farsi, most of y'all, right? This is a picture of me on one of the front pages in Iran, in the main political newspaper there, and it says that Walayati Faqih is a protection against global fitna. So what does that mean? That means that we have been here. We love the Islamic Revolution. We love the people that are sacrificing themselves in Lebanon, in Yemen, and all over technically the Gulf, just to be clear about it. You know, including Iraq, still some tension in the Islamic Republic, but with all of that fitna going on, there's one country that stands head and shoulders above all the rest, maintaining their dignity, maintaining their self-respect, and improving in agriculture and science, right? And in all the fields of human development, the Islamic Republic is going fast ahead of the rest of that region. They're not lackeys like in Saudi Arabia, following behind and begging for any help, using all their resources, right, to buy weapons from America to slaughter their neighbors, right, in Yemen. They're not doing that. That's what they're doing, but the Islamic Republic is not doing. They're supporting the people of the whole region, and we thank Allah for them. And we want to let them know that we're here, and we're not going to sit back and not mention how happy that we are about what's going on. Look here what it says. Revolution from Egypt to the Americas. Oakland and the American Islamic Revolution. At the top, it has who we used to call H. Rap Brown. H. Rap Brown, or Imam Jamil Al-Amin, was framed over 20 years ago, and he's been in prison all that time, and he's been going through medical challenges ever since he's been in there. And this is the Imam Jamil Al-Amin. Then down here we have our brother who was assassinated in Detroit. He was assassinated in Detroit over 10 years ago. This is Imam Luqman. Then you have me down here. Now I want you to imagine what everybody feels when they see this. They know what they're looking at. They say, we got your main man. He's in prison for the rest of his life. You're the homeboy up in Detroit. We slaughtered him and shot him either 18 times or 20 or 21 times. And here you are. What this says is, nigga, if you don't get yourself together and leave us alone, we're going to kill you. We're going to do you like all the rest of your friends. Here's what we say. They have old saying in the American English about, you can kiss my behind. That's what we mean about the Americans. Brothers and sisters, when we consolidated our effort to support the Islamic Republic of Iran decades ago, this is when all of this fitna began. So you could imagine if I come into the United States of America and here, look, I got a picture. Ain't no African American or no other American ever had even contact with the Rahbar, right? And I come in through customs with one of these, a picture like this. What do you think the Americans think? And the other time, the same time, I got a big picture on the front page, or actually at that time I had the actual newspaper, right? I'm telling you, we don't fear America. We don't have we're not concerned about what they like and what they don't like. We're concerned with the truth and with the freedom of people all over America. It's not only us. Here's our brother in Nigeria, Allama Zakzaki, right? Now, if you think maybe my grandson might have been martyred, or maybe my son was attacked, but he lived. Allama Zakzaki, I think it was either 4 or 6. Was it 4? I'm not sure, but it's somewhere up there. It's either 4 or 6 of his sons were martyred in Nigeria, right? Allama Zakzaki is a friend of mine, but he's not only a friend of mine, he's the leader of the Islamic movement and a lover of Ahlul Bayt, and spreading the love of Ahlul Bayt all over the African continent. That's why they jumped on him. That's why they killed, they say 1,000. We say now, since this flyer was put out, now they have killed thousands of people. We're telling you that we're living in a world that needs unity, it needs discipline, and it needs organization. And therefore, those of us who are here in America, we say we've had enough. Yes, we spent 40 years running around talking about the anniversary of the revolution, talking about Margbag America, and that was good. But now we have to develop internal institutions that feed to the outside, that support what we call it nonviolent resistance. But what we say for here in America, we have to develop a movement that is inclusive to all the people in America. Because when we say Margbag America, death to America, we don't mean death to the people of America. We don't mean death to the innocent people who are of Latin origin or of other origins who've never done nothing to nobody. We mean Margbag America, death to the system that has caused pain and suffering all over the world. And today, the reason I'm saying it today, especially because they're having some trials here. Maybe they might have found old dumb Trump innocent, but I'm telling you, the world is looking at America different than it was before. The world is seeing America as a crippled giant. And the things that we used to say years ago about Margbag America, death to America, America, those slogans must have been heard by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his angels. And Allah ordered his angels to develop the environmental circumstances on this earth, and that America that we were shouting death to has technically died. That America that was omnipresent all over the world, ships and planes, and interfering with business and commerce all over the land, that America is dead. So all of our shouts, death to America, has killed it. I'm telling you, believe it or not, if you love America, you're in a lot of trouble. When I say love America, not the people. If any of you go back to last summer when they had the Black Lives Matter activities, we were in the forefront of cataloging and filming those activities and also making commentary on those actions that was going on. Okay, the other is export of the revolution. The revolution was not something like in the early years, y'all all remember, I know, we used to go around with flyers and pamphlets and passing them out like this would be the export of the revolution. But I'm telling you, the behavior of Iran and the people inside of Iran and the people supporting Iran has caused this Western system to shake and tremble in front of everybody's eyes. The revolution has been exported. Where has it been exported to? It's exported now all over the Middle East. Remember in the early part of the Gulf War, Iran was by itself. Iran was by itself, and it was fighting not only Saddam, but it was fighting America with all of its satellite imagery that it gave to Saddam Hussein. It was fighting all of America because America was supporting it with arms, and Britain and Germany and other countries were supporting Saddam Hussein with poison gas to use on the battlefield. France was sending Exocet missiles to Iraq. The Russians were sending T-72 tanks to Iraq, the most deadly at that time. And they were sending Jordanian regulars. They were sending Egyptian pilots and Egyptian technicians to Iraq. So Iran was not fighting only Iraq, it was fighting the whole world. And it survived. It survived and it thrived. We're happy to be here today so that we can remind the people that we do not have to have any misgivings or any feelings that we can't do it, because we have already seen, with no help from nobody. Okay, now Iran has, let's call it, is strategically located, and we have strategic assistance. In those days, Syria was the only Arab country in the world, right, that was supporting or leaving the Islamic Republic alone. Now we have to support Syria. They ask, why are you supporting the Hafiz, not Hafiz Assad, Bashar Assad? Why are you supporting him? That's what they say to Iran. We're supporting him because when we were all alone and nobody was on our side except Syria. And the control of Syria exercised, right, over Lebanon at that time. They allowed trainers to come in through Syria to Lebanon and train the Hezbollah. And in 2006, Hezbollah showed who it was. It showed itself the greatest army in the Middle East because it was able to defeat and make those Israelis cry on national television. They was crying big tears. They couldn't help it. They were being slapped from side to side by the trainees of the Islamic Republic. So, you know, if you got the trainer here and the trainee is whooping everybody, you know, don't nobody want to fight the trainer, right? Hold on. I'm going to tell you something. Look at it, what's going on. They got this, the Israelis have got everybody trying to fight Iran. Why? Because the Israelis had already got whooped by the trainee of the Islamic Republic. So you think they ain't got enough sense to know that they don't want to fight the trainer when the trainees in 2006 whipped them hands down? I'm telling you, excuse me, I don't want to get excited, but look, you got to get excited or be excited when we're not on the defensive anymore. Allah is putting us on a trajectory that if we continue with Iman, that is with our faith and use vision, there's no limit to where we can go. There's no limit to where we can go. So now all we have to do is join in, is not sit here in the West now and celebrate what they're doing back home. Now it's time for us to organize our institutional reality so that we can contribute to the struggle in the Muslim world. So that means we already see where they go. Look at the murders and the killings that they have done in Yemen. Poorest Arab country in the world being destroyed by the richest Arab country in the world. What does that sound like? I want to read something to you that at the beginning of the revolution, Imam Khomeini stated. This is one of our favorite flyers. It said, rid yourselves of depression and apathy. Improve your methods and programs of propagation. Try diligently to present Islam accurately and resolve to establish an Islamic government. Assume the lead and join hands with the freedom-loving peoples. An Islamic government will be established. Have confidence in yourselves. You have the power, courage, and sense of strategy needed to struggle for liberty and independence. You who succeeded in waking the people and inspiring them to struggle will cause imperialism and tyranny to tremble. Day by day, you are accumulating more experience, and your ability to deal with the affairs of society is increasing. Once you have succeeded in overthrowing tyranny, you will certainly be able to administer the state and guiding the people. This is something Imam Khomeini said. The first thing he said, rid yourselves of apathy. That means us here in the West, we cry about this, oh, we got the coronavirus going around here. Hey, coronavirus ain't nothing. The people in Yemen have bombs, have cholera, have the whole apparatus of the United States weapons arsenal being given to Saudi Arabia to use against those defenseless people. That's what's happening right now. So now, what about me and you? It's our duty, it's our responsibility to check ourselves out and see what in the world can we do. All right, now let's get to some of that. Now remember, there's 4 characteristics of the Islamic Revolution. First, it talked about death to America. Then it talked about export of the revolution. Now we want to go to a model of Islamic survival. And we see that the Islamic Republic, this is the 42nd anniversary, has survived 42 years of maximum fitna. That's what the Islamic Republic has done. So now, the development inside of the Islamic Republic in agriculture, in science, in technology and engineering, all of that technology is coming from inside of Iran based on its own internal self. Nobody's coming from the outside to help it. So in missile technology, the Islamic Republic have developed the defense mechanism that it can defend its own self. In missile technology, in every other aspect that's needed for a modern society to protect itself. That's the way the Islamic Republic, so it's become a model. And its survival have been so straightforward and so consistent that it makes us proud to have been an early, very early supporter of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I want to read an ayat that gives some feeling to that. This is Surah Baqarah, ayat 250 and 251. When they advanced to meet Goliath and his forces, they prayed, "Our Lord, pour out constancy on us and make our steps firm. Help us against those who reject faith." By Allah's will, they routed them, and David slew Goliath. And Allah gave him power, wisdom, and taught him whatever else he willed. And did not Allah check one set of people by means of another? The earth would indeed be full of mischief, but Allah is full of bounty to all the worlds. This is the ayat we've always liked because when the people of the past had faced a great challenge, it says right here, when they advanced to meet Goliath, of course it stands for the big force, the unbeatable power, they prayed, "Our Lord, pour out constancy, make us constant." That means constant and patient. Give us firmness. Help us against those who reject faith. Other people join the rejectors of faith. When America give a call, everybody come running and they join up. Not anymore. These people said, "Help us against those who reject faith." By Allah's will, they routed them. David slew Goliath, the little David, like Iran. The little country slew the big monster Goliath, the one that everybody, when he showed up on the battlefield, everybody broke and run. But little old David, Iran, came with a slingshot. And he fired it into the thinking center, right? The psychological home of Goliath. He fired it right there. He took 5 smooth stones out of the brook, but he didn't use all 5 of them. He fired one of them. That one stone went into the thinking center of Goliath, and that one stone was La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then Goliath fell down, and he took his own sword, and David slew Goliath. That's not only a reality, but that's also a metaphor for you and I. The great Satan is slain. Now, don't forget now, there's plenty of other Satans running around. But the great Satan, America, is dead. America can't keep itself together. America has been self-invaded by its own people, right? America has lost charge, has lost buoyancy. America is heavy and sluggish and tired. The American civilization that they talked about in the past is all gone, dear believers. Thanks to the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'm trying to tell you, that's why we're thankful. We're thankful for many things. We're thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine some years ago, the people of the world had no hope of any Islamic struggle or any progress, right? We felt depressed and almost defeated. And so for the last 42 years, we have been inspired and we have hope in the future. And now, with this hope, look, we can, with Allah's help, we can write our own future. We can design our own future. We can design our own path. We don't have to be subservient like Saudi Arabia. We don't have to be people following America around, right, for help, aid, and assistance. And we got all the oil and all the power in the world, but we put it on boats and send it over here to help these boys oppress us. Those days are coming to an end. Thanks to Allah, thanks to the people of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and before closing, I want to say thanks to the system and the personality of Wilayati Faqih. I don't want y'all to go to sleep on this issue of Wilayati Faqih, because some people run around and they talking about, well, a little wilayah here, a little wilayah there, but what is this Wilayati Faqih? I'm telling you, Wilayati Faqih is the thing that have helped you all of these years. The people of Afghanistan are not cowards. They fight harder than anybody, right? The people of Afghanistan. The people of Pakistan are not fearful. They fight at the drop of a hat. I'm telling you, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Pakistan, the people all over the world are not always afraid to fight, but they do not have just and honest leadership. That's what Wilayati Faqih is. It is the ruler, as Dr. Abdul Aziz Sashadina said, it's the rulership or the leadership of the just Faqih. So in his book, he calls them the just Faqih. That means the one that exudes justice. He don't keep all the money for himself. He don't keep all the wealth that comes into him. In the West, they talk about the rahbar. It says he has an account and it has zillions of tomans, zillions of dollars in it. Well, they don't know about comps, right? All of the marija collect comps. They collect comps, right? We all know what comps is. They talk about that comps like it's the rahbar's personal money. You know, one of the marija of past times, he had I think it was a liver disease, and he died by that liver disease. You know why? He had all the comps in the world, but he never used that for himself. I mean, of course, if I was doing it, I'd have used, I said, well, I got a little sickness, and I think the people wouldn't mind if I use a little bit. I'm trying to tell you, those people who are pristine, those people who are pure, those people who are honest in character, they call them the worst names here in America. We don't care what they say. We know what we got. Okay, so dear believers, I forgot one little picture. You know, this is the poor brother. This is in Oakland. Now, I was attacked in our masjid. It's so much blood that they thought the blood down here that I had got shot in the chest, but I got busted upside the head. Here's what I'm trying to tell you. I feel honored. Now, the American government has a special feeling about me. Of course, you can say they might hate the brother. Anything anybody do against me, they say that's good. And they can get rid of all their problems, just let them attack Imam Musa. I'm saying, brothers, before closing, thanks to Allah, that we got a chance to see a true Islamic revolution in our time. We also got a chance to see a people who were naturally upholding. It's not saying the people of Iran are perfect but they are good. You know why? They're going by what they can see and what they believe. I remember in 2009, they had all this fitna, y'all remember, all this fitna on the news. They was they thought they had a hand on destroying the system of the Islamic Republic. The Rahbar came out and gave a speech, and it was all calmed down. And he said at the end, something like this: I dedicate this in 2009. I dedicate myself to you, the honorable reality. That's Imam Mahdi. I only have, you remember this part, I only have my broken body. Remember, it was on the 6th of Tir. The 7th of Tir, 72 people got blown up in Tehran. On the 6th of Tir, the Rahbar was blown up and he lost his hand. And he said, I only have my broken body. And everybody started crying. I was happier that day for the Islamic Republic than many other days. There's other days too. But that showed the people, they was lying in the news, lying in the media about the Islamic Republic is finished and all. They had the Greens and they had all kind of hypocrites running around. And the Islamic Republic is still here. Dear believers, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the happening and the survival and the thriving of the Islamic Republic in Iran. So thank you for watching and listening. Excuse me, I might have gave a different subject than you was expecting, but hey, I've been at this subject in me for so long that I haven't been able to express it except a few times, and I wanted to express it this time. I thank you for having the patience to pay attention to this, and we hope that in the future we're able to finish our part. Build an honest and sincere Islamic movement here in America that have leadership, have coordination, and we are able to support. Look at all the wealth we have. We're going to develop a system that has no illegality in it, and we want to support the good Muslims all around the world because we're in the West where they still have some money. You better get organized quick because China is going to get most of the money in the world, so we want to get busy so we can get the last remnants of the wealth here in America to help our people in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and help us in Syria rebuild all of our countries. And we thank you for listening. We thank the leadership of the Islamic Republic for being there, and we ask Allah to help all of us be good supporters. So upon the return of Imam Mahdi, he'll be happy with what he finds. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Imam Abdullah Musa. That was very beautiful. And, and this is something that we know that you're passionate about. And alhamdulillah, we could see the passion in your speech and your voice and the struggle that you and your family and your close ones have done on this cause. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase your tawfiqat on this front. And, may Allah give baqa to your struggle, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make your tongue in the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this revolution go on forever, inshallah. Moving on, we have Shaykh Yusuf Ali, but before I introduce him, just a small, as the Imam talked about too, we talk about indigenous problems. Indigenous problems should have indigenous solutions as well. In a post-colonial world that we lived in the Islamic world, the developing world, if you look around this post-colonial world, all we have is systems in place that were imported. Some of them, for example, you have so-called Westminster systems of democracy. You have families and dictators and rulerships that were implemented as the colonial powers left. And not only that, in some cases, you also have socialist and communist movements, like just like the Ba'athi regime in Iraq. There are many examples, but none of them were able to resolve the problems of the people in that region. I'm not saying that the system that I'm talking about is the only system, is the ideal system, but it's worth a shot. You should look at it and see how it was able to provide, in spite of its shortcomings, in spite of many issues that we know of. It was able to provide an alternate means, an alternate method of governing, where it guarantees a nation to be sovereign, a nation to be independent. Rahbar himself says, and I quote, he says, "The day when the world was divided into the material West and East, and no one presumed a major religious movement would emerge, the Islamic Revolution stepped into the scene glorious and mightily. It broke the frameworks, it flaunted to the world the outdatedness of the cliches, it put religion and the material world together and declared the coming of a new era. It was much expected that the leaders of deviation and oppression would react, but in vain. Whatever the right and left modernity did, from pretending to ignore the emerging and unprecedented voice to extensive efforts for suffocating it, just brought them closer to their indispensable demise. Today, after various celebrations of the victory of this revolution and many Fajr 10 days, one of the two centers of animosity has already perished, and the second one is struggling with predicaments that signal its death in near future, whereas the revolution is advancing while preserving and adhering to its model. As the Imam talked about, Imam Abdullah Musa talked about here. We support the struggle of the American people against its system to bring about a change, to remove the hegemonic aspect of this system that has caused chaos in the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the life and tawfiq to see that day. Without any further ado, I would like to invite Shaykh Talim Yusuf Ali. Let me introduce him by saying he was born and raised in the United States. He pursued his bachelor's and master's degree in computer science at Stanford University, at which time he was an active member of the Sabah community. After graduating in 1999, Sheikh Salim worked at a Silicon Valley software company, first as a software developer and then as an engineering manager. Disenchantment with the typical career path of the Silicon Valley lifestyle and a desire to learn about Allah, the Quran, and Al-Bayt, and a ziyarah trip to Iran led him to change his course in life. At the end of 2003, he left his job and moved to the holy city of Qom to pursue his Islamic studies in the Hawza. He completed his Islamic studies from Al-Mustafa University in Qom. He worked with Waliul Asr School in the Greater Toronto area. He lectures locally at various centers around the world. Please welcome Sheikh Salim Yusuf Ali with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Welcome, Sheikh.
Thank you very much, Brother Asif. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi al-tahirin. I wanted to thank Allah Ta'ala for this opportunity. I wanted to acknowledge the efforts of the organizers and of our esteemed speakers and presenters. May Allah reward you. I wanted to congratulate all of you on the 42nd anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. And also I wanted to acknowledge and congratulate the Imam of the time and all of you on the birthday anniversary of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, and on the arrival of the blessed month of Rajab. Inshallah, I would like to see what kind of a few lessons that we can derive from the success of the Islamic Revolution, and some practical realities and understandings that we can take from it. But first, I want to mention, just as a means of seeking God's blessings and the special attention of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, I want to mention just one point about Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, and in particular relevant to our discussion this evening. The father of the Islamic Revolution, the Imam of the Islamic Revolution, Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi alayhi, in his in his last testament and his will, when he is talking about what is it that he is proud of, and the legacy of Islam and the legacy of the teachings of truth and of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. In one of the places, one of the lines, he mentions something which is a bit eye-opening, and it really makes us pause and think. He says that, and I quote based on the translation, he says that we take pride that the fifth Imam, Baqir al-Ulum alayhi salam, is the greatest personality of history, and no one but the Almighty God, His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the infallible Imams has appreciated his stature. This is something very interesting, that of all the Imams that Imam Khomeini would single out Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam. What does this tell us? What is it about Imam Baqir alayhi salam that made him be a particular role model for Imam Khomeini, that he would look up to him in particular among all the Imams? Of course, in his speeches and in his writings, we see respect and special attachment to all the members of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but there's some reason why he singles out Imam Baqir alayhi salam. Maybe it's because of Imam Baqir alayhi salam's struggle against the corruption at the time, his struggle to establish truth, his struggle to bring out the true teachings of Tawheed. And Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi alayhi, perhaps he found that his struggle was like the struggle that he himself was going through. Maybe because of the type of approach that Imam Baqir alayhi salam took. In one of Imam Khomeini's works, he actually narrates a story from the life of Imam Baqir alayhi salam that I want to share with you this evening. One time, this is narrated from Imam Sadiq, his son. He says that my father, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam, he was very generous and he would give charity. But when he would give charity, he had this habit that he would take what he was going to give and he would place it in the hand of the recipient, but then he would take it back from him. Why would he do that? Because he would take it back and then he would smell the scent of it and he would kiss it and then he would give it back again. And then Imam Sadiq alayhi salam explains, he says that the reason why my father would do that is because when somebody gives charity for the sake of God, it's God who takes it from the hand of the charity giver. And my father wanted to acknowledge the presence of God's hand. And so out of acknowledgement of this, out of awareness of this, he would kiss and he would smell the scent of that. Perhaps it's this aspect of the life of Imam Baqir alayhi salam that was particularly appealing for Imam Khomeini, that he was somebody who lived this life of tawheed, of practically living the reality of understanding that everything is in the hand of God. And so with that inspiration, I want to now take not too much of your time to just see if there's some lessons that we can take from the 42nd anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, and also, inshallah, some practical points. I want to mention 3 lessons and 3 practical points. I myself am not Iranian. I don't live in Iran. I don't have any type of citizenship or residency in Iran. And I think many of the people who are watching our program today and who are participating in this event today, they are in a similar situation. What is it about the success of a revolution in another country, perhaps far from where many of us live, that can be of inspiration and that we can take a lesson for us? Well, there's 3 points that I want to mention in terms of ibra, in terms of taking lessons. The first one is the lesson of understanding where true strength lies. In the lead up to the Islamic Revolution, we had a figure who was Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi alayhi. Imam Khomeini was in every way every sense of the word, he was somebody who was empty-handed when it came to the possessions of this world. He didn't have a lot of wealth. His home was very humble and simple. His headquarters was his home. He didn't have an army. He didn't have control of the media of the country. He had literally many people who were seminary students and seminary scholars who were supporting him. Sometimes they would be spending the night transcribing his lectures, and they would use old Xerox machines to make copies, and then they would have people drive to different cities to go and distribute his words. And it was that type of operation. On the other hand, you had a regime that was supported by one of the superpowers in the world. They say that there was 6,000 U.S. troops in the country of Iran that were there to support the Shah at that time. He himself was heavily armed. He had an entire military force. He had certain imperial forces that were at his every beck and command. I mean, that they were there at his service. He was somebody who was very, very influenced and very tight with the American government. Just to give you an idea of the support that America was giving the Iranian government at that time, this is a quote from George Baldwin, and he says that this was written in 1967. He says, "There's hardly an agency or program of the Iranian government concerned with training or education that did not have its Point 4 experts or U.S. contract group," meaning that the U.S. foreign aid was affecting every aspect of the Iranian government at that time. You had a type of cultural exchange. Some of the most famous actors and actresses in Hollywood would be traveling to Iran, and they would be the special guests of the Shah at that time. And how Hollywood itself is a very powerful source of directing trends in the world, and many other things that were there to support the Shah and his regime. But what we saw was that somebody who, from a worldly perspective, was empty-handed, was able to accomplish this type of revolution with very little means. And if you look at what's happening in the world today, recently, just in recent times, you saw that there was a coup d'etat in Myanmar. You see in some Latin American countries, there's coup d'etats that take place. These happen through heavily armed military forces. But yet here, without that, somebody was able to accomplish something like this that was lasting for so many years, for decades. What does that tell us? It tells us something about where strength lies. True strength comes from within. And that leads me to my second point that I want to drive as a lesson from the Islamic Revolution, and that is the importance of taqwa. When non-believers and people who disregard the presence of the Supreme Being and the Almighty Lord, when they analyze the Islamic Revolution and its success, they inevitably failed in being able to do so correctly. When it happened, they didn't predict it. After it happened, they said that, it's just a passing thing, and pretty soon, maybe the military will do a coup d'etat, they'll take over, and it was just a matter of time. And then you had the Iran-Iraq war, and that was going to be the end to it, and so many incidents, one after the other. But they weren't able to understand what was happening. There were times where you'd have the experts, the political experts, who would come together and they would make a strategy, and somehow Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi alayhi, through one speech, was able to defoil their plans. There was one time where the parliament, this was leading up to the revolution, they in secret passed a bill to give a type of diplomatic immunity to the American diplomats who were present in Iran at that time. And it was supposed to be very hush-hush, and and it was something that America was imposing on them. And it happened, and it took all day, and it went into the night, and because there was so much discussion around it, and they finally decided to pass this resolution. The next morning, there was some people who rushed to Qom to come to Imam Khomeini and to tell him that this is what they've done, and this is what they've passed. And he told them that I knew about it last night. Here was somebody who didn't have a whole institute that was working for him, that was trying to analyze what was going on and giving him reports. It wasn't the case that he was getting like a daily summary of, the current events being sent to him in his inbox. He was somebody who was living in a dusty city in the middle of, just in a city of Qum, but yet somehow he was aware of what was taking place. The Quran tells us in Surah Al-A'raf, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, إن الذين اتقوا إذا مسهم طائف من الشيطان تذكروا فإذا هم مبصرون. Those people the people of Taqwa, when a party from the devils come to them and they want to touch them and attack them, تذكروا. Their taqwa is a source of them being aware. And فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ, it gives them basira. It gives them awareness and insight, and they're able to see the truth. And this is what we saw leading up to the revolution in the personality of Imam Khomeini, and what we see even in the decades after that, those who followed his way. The third observation and the third lesson that perhaps we can take, and I'd like to suggest that we take from the 42nd anniversary of the revolution, is one of hopefulness. We live in a world where there are a lot of trials that people are facing, and there's a lot of gloom and a lot of, let's say, sadness over different things that are taking place. Oppression, whether it be at home or whether it be abroad, sickness, disease, lockdowns. And if you go to the headlines, sometimes you think that, well, what's the point? Maybe there is nothing that's going to come out of all our struggles. We should just, give up and just, let's say, become, vegetables and just live our life and just be done with it. But if somebody looks at the events that have taken place, and for 42 years, this struggle, and how the Islamic Republic has stood firm and grown, and as Imam Abdullah was mentioning, it's not only survived, it's thrived. This is something which gives us hope that it's not just that and that part of that region of the world and those people. This is something which is attached to God's promises. And when it comes to God's promises, God does not go back, and he does not break his promises. If you just Google regime change in Iran, you'll see, and you go look at it historically, you'll see how many times these so-called experts have filled, the mainstream media with predictions of the collapse of the Iranian regime. Whether it be, as the esteemed speaker mentioned, the Green Revolution, whether it be the recent protests, whether it be the assassination of the Shaheed General Soleimani, and other incidents that have taken place over these decades. Time after time, they say that it's just a matter, it's on its last gasp, now it's in its twilight, and they come up with all these expressions about it. But you see that no, if you go and look at the reality, it's from many measures, there's thriving taking place, there's growth taking place. The message is being heard around the world, the message of freedom, the message of true humanity, the message of justice. These are things which are the slogans which are reverberating, and it's growing, that voice and that the echo of these things. It's like something which it's this crescendo which keeps on growing louder and louder. So these are things which we can take a lesson from when it comes to our struggles. Allah Ta'ala has many beautiful promises in the Quran. He says, for example, in Surah Al-Hajj, he says, لَيَنْصُرَنَّ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَنْصُرَهُ. Indeed, for sure, Allah is going to grant victory and is going to be of assistance to those who assist him. Now, Allah Ta'ala doesn't need assistance, he is needless. But he has decreed that the success of his religion and the teachings and the values of that religion, the true justice which it calls for, that success is going to be granted when human beings strive for it. And he says that I'm there to help you. I am there to give you victory. In Surah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, verse number 7, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tansurullaha yansurkum wa yuthabbit aqdamakum. Sometimes we feel that our footsteps are faltering. Maybe our voice isn't being heard. Maybe our efforts are to naught. Maybe we face some challenges. We face disappointments. But what we can learn from, if we go and study the success of the revolution, we can learn that our job is to do our responsibility, and Allah Ta'ala will take care of the rest. He is the one who promises that. So these are three takeaways. One of them, just to recap, was about where true strength lies. The second one was about the importance of taqwa and that spiritual success that's given to somebody who has God at the center of his or her life. And the third one was about hopefulness. Now, I want to conclude with 3 points of takeaways when we're trying to say what can we do going forward. The first one is about the importance of being aware and being insightful and taking into account what is happening in the world. If we go back to the history of the Islamic Revolution, before Imam Khomeini rahmatullahi alayhi, he became one of the leading figures, and people, his words started to have an impact on people, and he became known as a leader. There was others, even in the Hawza of Qom, who kind of saw that religion has something not too much to do with what's going on in the world. And for example, it got to the point where there were some well-intentioned but short-sighted scholars who would say that for a student of the Hawza to read the newspaper, that's something which is haram. Sometimes there was some of the scholars who disagreed with this, and they were avidly reading the newspaper. They wanted to understand what was going on. And they even, when the radio came out, they realized that this is, yes, it's a tool of potential corruption, but it's also a way of being aware of what's going on. So sometimes they would wrap their radio in special cloths so nobody would see it, and they would only unwrap it, when no one else was looking, and they would start listening to it. Imam Khomeini was somebody who was reading, he was reading newspapers written by the Muslims, by the non-Muslims, by the enemies, and he was gathering information. He was aware of what was taking place. This is an important lesson for us. When we look at what's, COVID, and we see what the outcomes have been of COVID, one of the scholars was commenting. He says that this is a beautiful insight. He says that one of the hidden blessings of COVID is that at least people in the world now are becoming more aware of the importance of filtering the information that they get. They're not just taking whatever, let's say, the mainstream media or the elected officials say and believing in it blindly. They're doing their own research. They're looking at what are the other alternative opinions. They're realizing that truth itself is something which is a struggle to come across. And this is something that we can take for ourselves. I don't mean here that my message is not that we should just always have CNN on or BBC or Al Jazeera. That's the easy way out. And oftentimes that would be a source of misguidance for us. What I mean here is connecting with those people who are sincerely trying to shed light on what is taking place and being aware of what's going on and sharing that with others. The second and third practical takeaways I actually am sharing with you from the words of the leader of the Islamic Republic, the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, Hafidhahullah. These are 2 valuable lessons that I think give us insight in terms of what we need to do. He says in his second letter to the youth of the West, and I quote, he says that in any case, you are the ones that must uncover the outer layers and facade of your own society. You must find and untangle any deep-rooted knots and resentments. Fissures have to be sealed, not deepened. What is he recommending? What is his advice here? Well, he's saying that, first of all, you Muslims who are living in non-Muslim societies. And he's speaking to the youth and those who still have the hearts of youth, those who practice muruwa, that ethical quality of being young despite being elderly, which is something that can be attained through having that right akhlaq. He's speaking to them. He's saying that you have a responsibility in your own society. You need to understand. You need to study it. You need to understand where are those fissures. Go beyond the facade of what the picture that they paint to you in their social studies classes and their civics classes. No, you go understand what really is going on. Where are the centers of power? Who really calls the shots? Where is the oppression taking place? Find that. Understand where the knots are, and now be part of that process of undoing those knots, of healing those resentments. He doesn't call for revolutions. He doesn't call for creating more fissures. He calls for healing. That's something which gives us a lot to go by. And maybe for those of us who want to understand what our responsibility is, it gives us a different way of thinking about it. Sometimes we get boxed into certain ways of doing things, but we don't realize that, this is just maybe the tip of the iceberg in terms of our responsibility where we are. And the last point that I'll mention is again from the words of Ayatollah Khamenei. This is in his speech and his words that he gave when he's talking about the second stage of the revolution. He talks about this idea of everything has an expiry date. If you go and, for example, you open up your refrigerator, you'll see that so many of the goods, there's an expiry date. But he says, what is the expiry date of the Islamic revolution? So he says in regard to that, and I quote, "It is possible to assume an expiration date for anything. Yet, the global mottos of this religious revolution are exceptional. They will never expire because they match human nature in all eras." This statement is a profound statement. What he's saying is that if you have a movement where that movement's ideals are in tune with the human fitra, with the way that human beings have been created, and it is able to match that, then you can be sure that that movement will always be successful. Then he goes on to list some of those things which are fitri: freedom, ethics, spirituality, justice, independence, dignity, rationality, brotherhood. These are not limited to a single generation or society, such that they would, it's a trend and a fad where it would come in and come out. That's not the way it works. Why? Because la tabdila li khalqillah. Allah promises us in the Quran that the fitra and the way God creates human beings, that's going to be something which is eternal. So when it comes to that, what is it that we're trying to preach? What is it that we're trying to share? What approach are we going to take? It's going to be the approach of understanding what is a fitri way of leading our lives. What is a fitri lifestyle? Right now, we're at a time where there's so much of the way people live their lives which is unfitri. And that's what's creating a sense of deep dissatisfaction with life as a whole. People are struggling with mental health, with finding satisfaction in life because they've been taught a way of living which is far, far distant from the true fitri way that they were supposed to live their life. So we need to understand that for ourselves and to share that with others, that this is the way that human beings were meant to live, and aim at trying to understand those fissures in the society and work at trying to heal them and to bring people together along these values. We hope that we can, inshallah, we pray that we understand what our responsibilities are, and we hope that we can fulfill them, and that we hope that this fajr, as it's called, this dawn, is something which is not just limited to that event that took place 42 years ago, but that all of us can have our individual dawns of realization, of spirituality, and that we can be a source of bringing dawn in the societies that we live in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Sheikh, for that wonderful speech that you had given on this topic. Indeed, we learned a lot from it. In fact, the Sheikh just stole my thunder. I was going to read the excerpt from Rabbi's speech on that particular aspect of human nature. Nonetheless, I'll repeat it again. But before we move on and close this program, I would like you to all recite Surah Fatiha for the soul of Imam Khomeini and all the shuhada associated with the revolution. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would like to thank you all and all the speakers that have presented their point of view. Again, to all my listeners here and listeners in the future who might look at this program, you might not necessarily agree with everyone or with each one of them, or even a small aspect of a certain speaker. But nonetheless, we should have wus'at, a bigger chest, to take upon the secrets of the deen, of the knowledge, and also the different point of view. And that's what freedom of expression is all about. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that tawfiq to be able to listen to other point of views. And and give us the ma'rifah to recognize what is haqq, what is true, and what is batil. Moving on, I'm just going to repeat this again, as the Sheikh talked about, that it is, as the Rahbar says, it is possible to assume an expiry date for anything. Everything has an expiry date. Yet the global mottos of this religious revolution are exceptional. They will expire because they match human nature in all eras. Freedom, ethics, spirituality, justice, independence, dignity, rationality, brotherhood are not limited to a single generation or a society, so they would rise in a period and decline in the next. It is impossible to imagine a people who despise these values. As long as these values are dear to us, as long as we aspire to have these values, there will be no expiry date on this revolution, because, as the Rahbar says, it is associated to the fitrah of a human. And he keeps on and he goes and he says, the Islamic revolution, like a living and unwavering phenomena, is always flexible. That's another aspect of it. And ready to correct its mistakes. We hear this every day in the media, the mistakes, the problems with the Islamic Republic. Yes, there are problems, just like with any system. But the Rahbar talks about its being able to be flexible and to correct itself. But it is not revisionary or passive. It does not sit in one place and contemplate what's to do next. It is active. It is positively sensitive to criticism. It regards them as a divine blessing. And here we talk about a freedom to express. Every person in the Islamic State should be free to express their opinion if they see something wrong. And this is, Rebbe says, a divine blessing as well as a warning that to those who do not act upon their word. Yet it by no means takes distance from its values, which are blended with the religious faith of the people. Thanks be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With this, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring our keep us on the path of human nature that Allah had created us with, from cradle to grave, which are qualities of freedom, ethics, spirituality, justice, independence, dignity, rationality, and brotherhood and sisterhood. These are the traits that humans possess since their birth. And as long as humans aspire these traits, the support for the Islamic Republic, the support for the mustada'afeen around the world will always remain. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us such that inshallah, when the final Imam Abdullah ta'ala Farajahu Sharif comes, he sees the world that we have provided, we have strived to create a better world for him when he comes. With the final du'as of Imam Zamana, Allahumma kulli waliyika al-hujjat ibn al-Hasan, salawatuka alayhi wa ala abai fi hadhihi as-sa'a wa fi kulli sa'a, waliyan wa hafidha wa qa'idan wa nasira wa dalilan wa ayna hatta tuskinahu ardaka tawwa wa tumatti'u fiha tawila bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you for joining us. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you, and please take care of each other and take care of yourself. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.